Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm your host, Elias, and today we're joined by someone who has spent more than 2 decades helping shape modern biotechnology as a scientist, a CEO, a board member, and an investor. Few people have such a broad view of how ideas become medicines and how companies survive the long journey from science to impact. Luke, thank you for being with us. So
My
let's
pleasure.
begin.
Thanks for having me.
Uh, what first pulled you into biotech?
Ooh, that's always an interesting question. As a lot of things in life, it's sometimes the right moment and the right time, and a lot of luck is something I used to say. When I was a pharmacist, initial plan was just to do pharmacy studies. We had a pharmacy in the family, and just become a pharmacist in the officina. But my dad was a clinical biologist, so I was going to specialize to become a clinical biologist, but quickly realized during my studies there that, that was too much clinical work and too little business. And I saw my dad build out his own private lab into a relatively large lab and, with a lot of employees. So I decided to go to business school instead. And after business school, had not really a good idea, was still fascinated by science and drug development and medicines. So I started off in management consulting with Arthur D. Little, and I got a little bit lucky. It was the right time. It was end of the 90s, which was the first time that the human genome was kind of identified and unraveled. A lot of companies, governments, investors were questioning what should we do with this knowledge? How will this help further, drug development? And then they go to a consultant who, in all honesty, probably does not know much more. And although I was very junior, I got the opportunity to work on a lot of biotech projects because most of my consultant colleagues were, lawyers, economists, engineers, and had little insights into DNA, RNA, proteins. And as a minimum, I knew that. So I got to work on a lot of biotech projects when I was quite, young and at an early stage of in my career. And I got bitten by the bug, I would say. I got enthusiastic about what people were doing as a consultant. You do a lot of analysis, you see a lot of things happening. I got the luxury to do an audit on the Flemish Institute of Biotechnology, which was just 5 years old at that stage. And through that, got to know the whole Belgian biotech society network. And so 3 years thereafter, I was kind of tired of being a consultant and I wanted to jump into the water myself and help to start my first two biotech companies. And so directly off the deep end, which is, I think, always a good way to learn how to swim. It's a bit risky, but it's also a fun way to do it. And that's how I got into biotech. So it's a little bit a story of serendipity. It's a little bit kind of in the genes as well, as both my parents are pharmacists and, are involved with healthcare, with medicines, not on the drug development biotech side. But then through a sideway, through luck and opportunity, I got to know a lot of great people who were inspiring, and that got me into biotech. So long answer to a short question, but that's about how it went.
So, you weren't necessarily set on biotech. You basically went into consulting to learn how to swim.
It's kind of a way to do it. I came out of my MBA studies and, I had honestly not a real good idea of what I wanted to do. I was still intrigued by, the life sciences industry, but it
Mhm.
seemed like, you knew pharma, but I wasn't really aware of the biotech scene. I wasn't really deep into that. A certain moment I thought, let's become a trader, and I almost became a trader at JP Morgan,
Oh,
but
wow.
I then opted for consulting because I met somebody at a consulting forum who told me that, the combination of business and life sciences does exist. And in his firm at RTD Little, there were some options for that, doing some consulting work for larger pharma, but also for
Hmm.
mid-sized and I would say biotech companies. There were not a lot of biotech companies, but it's really a question of who do you meet and a bit of luck, to be honest, how I got into it. I didn't have my eyes set on it. I indeed went to business school not really knowing where it would kind of lead to. But I think that's a bit the story throughout my career. You can do a lot of planning, but sometimes you have to go with your gut. Sometimes you have to go with the feeling, and you have to just be open to listen to what people tell you and when opportunities kind of pop up, and then dare to jump. That's also important.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And so you have worn many hats, right? Consultant, CEO, board member, investor, as previously stated. Across all of these roles, what would you say is the thread that ties your entire career together?
I think you got to get passionate about what you do, and you got to enjoy working, because you spend a lot of time of your life in the office, or wherever you need to be in the lab, and you got to be passionate about what you do. You got to see the greater good, I would say, is a heavy word, but you got to be quite enthusiastic about that, and always finding a passion, always finding, so it shouldn't feel like work. It should feel like a mission, and it's also why I still do what I want to do. Is, I want to help new medicines kind of come to patients, as there's still a lot of patients who will benefit from new medicines. We don't have a solution for everything yet. Probably we will never will, but every little kind of step towards that is something I feel good about, and it drives me. And some people can get very passionate about other applications, other industries, and that's great as well. We need those people as well, but I get passionate about trying to find new medicines for patients, and that's important. It's something that certainly kind of has grown into me over the years. In the beginning, you start and you get excited. Yes, this is cool. What we're gonna do, try to make a new medicine. But then also day to day, you just do a lot, and you start to understand that there's a lot of, things that come into play if you try to build a biotech company. And just the ability to see a lot, to learn a lot, was also quite intriguing. And also the interest to keep learning and to keep pushing yourself is quite important. I think has been a threat throughout my career, and is still the case in the different roles. You have to be willing to roll up the sleeves. You have to be willing to dare to take decisions. And you have to work hard. Nothing comes by itself. There's no simple recipe to it. There's one way. Roll up the sleeves, and be persistent. I think that's also there. Don't kind of panic when there's a little bit of a setback. Don't panic when things don't actually turn your way. If you do your best and you continue to work hard, you can also overcome a number of things. So persistence is another thing that I think differentiates people that make it in a career or not.
For sure. And that ties to actually doing and pursuing your passion.
Absolutely. It's easier to be persistent in something you're passionate about. If you're doing something just because you have to do it, then it's much harder. I
Yeah,
think,
long term.
work balance is important, and family is the most important ever. But also finding a passion in your life, and turning that into your job is a luxury. And obviously for that I feel blessed.
So let's get into the reality of biotech. People often think that biotech is glamorous or futuristic. What's the part of the journey that most outsiders misunderstand?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty with it, huh? And the likelihood that you fail is much higher than the likelihood that you succeed. And I think that's important. Every time you start, with a new idea, or you try to test a new hypothesis, you expect the answer to be no, this wasn't the case, and that adds up. But if you're in a biotech company, you live by the grace of the financial world, you live by the grace of investors, because you're burning a lot of cash. And unfortunately, you can do everything right. If the biology ultimately doesn't plan out, and there's only, to be honest, there's only one good model. It's only once you get into man that you truly start to see whether this could work, yes or no. Um, so that's hard to deal with. So if you do everything right, you build a company, you kind of get to your clinical testing, and then for good or bad reasons, the result is not what you anticipated. It often means, back to square one or game over, and that's something that is not that easy to deal with. Also knowing that you're not sure if there is a company next year because you have to secure the financing. It's uncertain, markets can go south. Um, Markets can become more difficult than before. What you were working on was very interesting for a lot of people 2 years ago, but now everybody's zoomed into another therapeutic area, and what you were doing is seen as less relevant. So there's a lot of variables in play, and so having to deal with that uncertainty is also something you got to be prepared for, and it's not that easy, and not everybody's made to kind of deal with that uncertainty.
What prepared you? Was it more experience, mentorship?
Experience is something that only comes over the years. I think, obviously, I think about a lot of things very differently than I did 25 years ago. But that's also because you've seen a number of things, you start to recognize a number of things, and you learn also not to panic. And there were certainly things that I did differently than I would do now. That is a given, but that's the thing. Experience is something, you just have to earn, and you can't accelerate gaining experience. That's a given. So indeed, mentorship is very important. I had the luxury to work with a lot of great people, great mentors, and I
Gilbayan,
think
Henry Termier, John
Jill,
Crowley, John
ex
Martinari.
exactly all those people, and from everyone, you learn something, you pick up a number of things, and like George Golombeski and Terry Rosen were on my board at Dusk. They had seen a lot. They've done a lot of deals. They'd also seen a lot of, ups and downs, because one thing is a given. It's never from A to B in a straight line in drug development. So there's a lot of bumps in the road, and how to deal with that, how to kind of, think that through, how to think about further positioning the company, how to kind of make a hard decision, like, this project has no future. There was, of course, always a moment that you were very enthusiastic about a project or a target, but then, data tell you it's probably not as exciting as you thought it was. So admitting not defeat, but admitting, this is better to stop. On the other end, you also don't have to stop too early, because sometimes, uh, you know, the story is somewhat different than you initially thought, and you learn by going, and then being persistent is important, and overcoming a number of things. So, but like I said, mentors and all the people you mentioned, and there's probably a zillion more, I think is important. So find a good group of people, and also build teams. Try to have peers around, amongst you, people you can kind of bounce off ideas, people that dare to challenge you, and people that you can challenge, because the biggest mistake you can probably make is to drink your own Kool-Aid, as they say in the US.
Um, you've said before that biotech is about generating data, but it's also as important to have a story and know how to tell it. What does that mean in practice?
Well, I think was my one of my very first mentors, Jan Buck, who was a colleague at Art of the Little, who told me exactly that. It's about the story as much as it is about the data, because you have to get people enthusiastic. You're selling, the idea that this might be something that is going to change life for patients. And so how you tell the story, how you communicate the data, how you communicate the plan is very important, because sometimes you see two companies with more or less the same kind of target, the same kind of approach. One gets heavily financed and the other doesn't. And sometimes it's not very easy to understand why, but it's often, how the story gets told, how you kind of communicate around it, that can truly make a difference. So yeah, I stayed by that thinking it through, and obviously you have to stay very close, to the reality, and you have to be very open and upfront and transparent about what you do. And so it's not about sugarcoating everything, or it's not about, trying to tell things that are not there, but the way how you present something is different. It's the same. One real estate agent would be better in selling the same house than another one.
So, would you say a company with great science can still fail simply because the story is not told well?
It's obviously not always black and white. Ultimately, great science will pan out. But I think maybe the science doesn't get the opportunity to kind of get the financing to bring it to reality if there's not, a great story to be told about it neither. So I think they do go hand in hand, to be honest.
And getting back to the mentors, throughout your career, you've had access to some extraordinary mentors, like the ones we mentioned before, and a lot more. If you take all of them together, what's the single greatest lesson they've collectively taught you about leadership, decision making, and getting through the dark days that every biotech company inevitably faces?
I think it's being very honest and transparent, and willingness to kind of listen and kind of to also adapt, not be stubborn. This is my idea and this is the way how I had it in my head, and continue to push forward if advice comes in that might tell you that your first idea might not have been the greatest idea. So it comes back to what I said. It's persistence. It's really persistence, but also agility, flexibility, willing to adapt. So I think it's a combination of both.
And now that you're on the other side of that equation, do you mentor others?
I try to. I try to work closely with the teams and I try to kind of share my 2 cents and my opinion in a pretty direct way. I think if anything is also the point I raised earlier. Transparency, directness, openness are key features, I think, in any business, but certainly in our business are quite important. So I'll give direct feedback to people and I'll give my advice. And obviously, sometimes people have to learn by making their own mistakes, and that's fine as well. But yeah, it's something that still motivates me that I also think is a fun thing to do, and it's almost my task. Yeah, I got the opportunity to learn a couple of lessons from great leaders, and so as a minimum, I can try to contribute also a little bit to kind of developing a new group of leaders after me.
It's great. So, when a company crosses your desk today, what does a typical deal process look like for you? From that very first conversation to the moment you decide to invest, how do you approach it
Yeah.
step by step?
Well, it's I'm not the most, I'm still a gut feeling guy, but on the other end, I think it starts down with the question, if everything works out the way as the company describes it, will it have a true meaningful impact on the patients they're trying to help? So I try to look at it from the patient's perspective. If everything goes right and they can develop, the product that they kind of claim they want to develop, is that going to truly change my life as a patient? And if the answer is yes, then I can get excited and I start to dig deeper. If the answer is like, I'm not so sure, and like, this is just marginal, and this is probably not having so much of an impact, or if you really dig deep, this is not as important to the patient, then maybe I don't get as excited and it's a no. So I think that's where it starts with. Thereafter, there's all the technical diligence and all the questions, what is known, how uncertain is the biology, are there any kind of other precedents, and you just do your technical diligence. That's mostly in the hands of my team, and I got a great team of super smart people, who can do that much better and faster than I can. But then it also boils down to meeting the team, feeling the passion from the team, seeing if they can tell the story. So judging that, how do they come across? Can they kind of entice me? Can they kind of get me intrigued? How did they kind of respond to a couple of, more challenging questions? Um, and then ultimately, if we really like it, we, let the company present. We, talk about it as a group. We go into discussion with the company. We look, if there's any other investors interested as well, because I like to syndicate relatively early with people I know and trust, because building a biotech company takes time, takes money, and it's always better to have more than one pair of shoulders to stand on. And then everything comes together and you negotiate and you see if you can get to a deal, if you can kind of get the financing closed, yes or no. And, that's how it goes. It's a very this is a very simple high level description. And obviously, you try to talk to patients, you try to talk to physicians that would ultimately use the product. You try to get a lot of insights. You try to speak to a couple of pharma companies to see whether, maybe one day this is also something they could get excited about. So it's a lot of factors that come into play. So I would say every case is a bit different. Every case is individual, and every process is somewhat unique. On the other end, every process also very similar, because ultimately is, do you believe in the team? Do you believe in the product opportunity? Do you believe that they have the skills, to bring this from A to B to Z, or can you find other people to do that? And will it ultimately help patients? So the key questions are always the same. And if you're positive on all of them, then it's worth a shot, and that's what you try to do.
It makes total sense. And what would you say a typical day looks like for you?
It depends on when it is. I think also there it's very difficult to give you a typical day. There's periods, and at this moment in my career, I'm a director and a chairman of a number of companies. So once we kind of get towards the end of every quarter, there's a lot of board meetings, but it's not just going to the board meeting. It's preparing the board meeting, sometimes working as a chairman with the CEO. What are the topics of the board
Hmm.
meeting? What should we go through? What things do we need to discuss? And so that's important. Other than that, other days, if you're in the beginning of your fund, you're more zoomed into finding and sourcing new deals. And so it's a lot of networking, looking at a lot of new opportunities. But also when you're already thinking about the next fund, then you're talking to a lot of LPs, so investors into your fund, with whom you need the connection. But even if you have a fund, you have to report to them as well. So it's a lot of, it's a people business, but it's also a data business. And so it's hard to give you a typical day.
Okay.
And you have to react also to data coming in. So we're in the great position that we have quite a large number of programs of companies in the portfolio that in 25 and 26 will generate clinical data, which is obviously a key inflection point for all the companies that are in biotech. And so when data come, that also takes some time to digest, to think it through, to look through it. So yeah, it's interesting. The variation is always quite appealing and interesting. But yeah, obviously a day in my career at this moment in time is completely different than how it was 25 years ago.
So one of your main areas of focus is oncology. And President Nixon declared a war on cancer more than 50 years ago. From where you sit, have we truly made substantial progress?
Oh yes, I think absolutely. I think there's still people dying from cancer, unfortunately. But if, let's say 50 years ago, I think if you got a cancer diagnosis, it was almost like a death diagnosis. And so it was very hard. And best case, we could kind of extend your life a little bit. But now people kind of almost get cured from cancer. Like,
Oh, yeah.
the chance of success to recuperate from breast cancer, certainly with an early diagnosis, is quite high. And so I think we've already really, helped a lot of patients. I think it's not as a dramatic diagnosis as it used to be, but it depends on who it is. And unfortunately, I also tell people all the time, N is one. So even if, your prognosis is survival of 95%, if, you're amongst the five unlucky ones out of the 100 patients, for you, N is one. That's bad. And the other way around, if the prognosis is very bad, then it's like 20%. But if you're one out of the five lucky ones that kind of get through, that respond well to the treatments we have, then for you it's fantastic. So, all these numbers don't say a lot. But bottom line to your question, have we made significant strides? Yes. Will we continue to make significant strides? I think so, yes. Every day, we get new insights. Every day we learn a little bit more. And so that means every day there's probably, a small group of additional kind of cancers that we can kind of help that we couldn't the day before.
What would you say the next wave of breakthroughs will come from?
It's always hard to predict that. I think this is also why I got into genetic diseases, and I think, in oncology that fits in precision medicine. I think we start to better understand what the root cause of the disease is. And it's the same if you have like an issue, a leak, and there's water flooding in your house, you can kind of clean it, you can kind of put things away and all of that. But unfortunately, it's only when you really find the root cause of it, that's when you kind of try and can start to fix it. And with all the new insights, with all the biomarkers, we're really getting towards precision medicine. And it's something I strongly believe in, that is, still going to help us much more than ever before, because cancers have a lot of different signatures, and really understanding that and then coming up with a tailored therapy. So precision medicine, I think, is something that will still yield a lot of good results.
And if you look ahead a decade, what would you say is the area of biotech that makes you most optimistic, apart from
Oof,
precision medicine? And
that's very hard to say, Elias. I don't have a crystal ball. I think it will come all down to these things. We learn more about new modalities. We learn more and more. We have, AI, big data processing. So the more information you have, the more precise you can kind of tailor your treatments. And I think that is gonna be very helpful. I think in the next 10 years, we'll see a lot of this come much more to fruition than before. But what exactly that is and where exactly that will be is for me hard to tell.
okay. And on another note, uh, would you say there are books that have changed your life or your perspective on life?
I read a lot, but to say this is a book that changed my life and to give you a title, I'll probably have to pass on that. There's not something that stands with me like this is it. I think I've learned most through networking. Be out there, meet a lot of people, speak to a lot of people, and just jump into the mud. You learn most in the field. You learn most by doing things, and I get more inspired by, sometimes a 5 minute chat at a reception from a great leader, that can be very inspiring and motivational. Um, or by, I always got very inspired when I met, patients and parents and caregivers, really understanding what they go through. So books are important. I love reading, and it's something that relaxes me, but I can't give you like this is the book. But I can
Okay.
say like if where I learned most or what inspired me most, it's really these, small conversations left and right, or long conversations left and right with people that are or affected by the disease or like me try to fight the diseases.
Hmm. And you have supported many founders and teams throughout your career. What's a piece of advice you give them that you wish someone had given you early on?
I think it comes back to things I've said earlier. Try to really
Okay.
understand what the patient needs, and also, try to make sure that you develop something that is going to be used. And so used, it means it needs to help the patient, and it needs to be something that fits into the treatment box of the physician that treats that specific patient. So make sure that you're not going for scientific perfection or scientific excellence, but make something that, is useful and really helps patients and also can be used by the physician. I think that's
Has impact.
that's something that, I thought if we made, the most interesting, most challenging scientific kind of backed product, that's going to sell itself and people are going to line up just to use it. But you have to think through a lot of the practical implications. Is this truly the case? Yes or no? And although, you start often in early companies with a great scientific idea and, your education is more geared towards writing a fantastic scientific publication, I think making a drug is something different. And so the patient perspective from day one is quite important. I think that's an advice I try to share with a lot of founders.
So, Luke, thank you. This was a really thoughtful, inspiring, and incredibly valuable, especially for young scientists and entrepreneurs working to build the future of biotech. Uh, we as a club truly appreciate your time and insights, and thank you for joining us.
Was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Always great, to be able to share my 2 cents. It's only 2 cents with people that are enthusiastic, that, want to join this industry or have joined this industry. Obviously, there's still a lot to do for all of us. So the more smart young people that join the fight against these diseases, the better. And so happy to do this. Happy that I could contribute. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you.